Professor X has had a lot of adventures across the multiverse, although I will say his alternate versions tend to either meet a tragic fate in most realities or otherwise just see him turn evil. In this reality, Charles and Magneto are not the ones to become Onslaught, but instead Jean and Magneto are. Like many other versions of Chuck that exist across the multiverse, this one dies earlier on, which causes events in this reality to splinter off and change. In the fight against Magneto, Charles ends up dead, and it is when this happens that Jean's latent and supreme powerful psychic abilities spark. This happens of course because Charles was the one who had put up barriers in Jean's mind to protect her from this awesome power that she has. When he dies, the barriers basically go with him. Jean is the one who ends up shutting down Magneto's mind, and as a result the two psyches merge to create this universe, Earth 696's version of Onslaught. This version of Charles and Jean and Onslaught first appeared in Original X-Men issue number 1, which only came out last year in 2023. Who would you like to see combined together to give us an Onslaught, and what do you think would be different about that? A truly nasty version of Charles, this alternate version is known as Herr Xavier. In this reality, known as Earth 597, the Germans instead won World War II, which changes things quite a bit. The Professor X we see here becomes a villain who is responsible for taking out Angel and Beast. Instead of the X-Men, we have the Reichsmen, which is made up of some of our standard X-Men members that we're familiar with from Earth 616. And we also have their opposing team, Lightning Force, which is also made up of different characters who parallel the current members of the Excalibur team. This version of Charles first appeared in the Excalibur one-shot Excalibur Weird War 3. On Earth 12, all heroes, even mutant heroes, are basically treated like celebrities, Professor X included. This version of Charles hails from the same reality as Calvin Rankin from the multiversal reality-hopping Exiles team. In fact, Charles was actually Calvin Rankin, aka Mimic's mentor on Earth 12, before he went off and was recruited to join the Exiles. In this reality, Calvin ended up going on to lead the X-Men thanks to Professor X's mentorship. When Blink heads to this reality to return Calvin's body after his death during his time serving on the Exiles team, this version of Professor X actually offers Blink a place with his own X-Men. Unfortunately, Blink was called to help save another reality, and so she could not accept Charles's offer. I love visiting the 1602 reality. Here, Professor X is known as Carlos Xavier. He would end up running a school that sought to find and recruit Witchbreed, which are like mutants kind of in the 1602 reality. The 1602 reality takes place in that very same year that it gets its name from, while also being known in terms of its designated reality number as Earth 311. This reality's creation resulted from Captain America being banished, sent through time by Purple Man to be lost so that he would become MIA, and to avoid the fallout from the hero's destruction, which would then of course have made Cap a martyr, a symbol for the people that Purple Man was oppressing to rally around. This was after Purple Man had basically come to rule the world, or a version of it anyways. As a result, the past was changed and Marvel's heroes started appearing sooner in comparison to when they showed up in the Earth 616 reality, in terms of our timelines. Kane, Marco, and Professor X end up becoming friends in this reality, often known as MC2. It's believed that they share the same origin as their Earth 616 counterparts, but instead Juggernaut ended up reforming later on in life. Actually kinda like what's been happening recently in the comics with Juggernaut. This version of Charles made his first appearance in a flashback in the Wild Thing series in issue number 5. Wild Thing is a series that follows the adventures of the daughters of Logan and Elektra. In the MC2 reality, aka Earth 982, you see we get to explore what the world could be like if superheroes were basically allowed to age, retire, and settle down. This is also where Spider-Girl comes from. This one is pretty great, but also pretty goofy in some respects. In this world and what if story, we answer the question, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In case you were wondering, we would get an extremely beefy version of Charles here. Honestly, I do think this story is pretty interesting too. When Kane was about to touch the gem of Sidorak, instead, Charles pushes him out of the way and he accidentally comes into contact with it. This grants him the powers of the Juggernaut, but also, like Kane, he gets trapped in the cave following the cave-in that ensues. When he finally emerges as the Juggernaut, he'll face off against Magneto, who is threatening the United Nations, and he'll ultimately beat him and then convince Magneto's team, the Brotherhood of of evil mutants to become the X-Men and work with and for Charles. With this X-Men team, Juggernaut would in essence conquer the world, protecting mutants but, not really caring so much about the fate of humans. Eventually, the X-Men and Magneto work together to overthrow Charles and send him hurtling through space. This all goes down in the second series of What If in issue number 13 if you wanted to check it out. This version of Charles, also known as MODOK, hails from the Age of Apocalypse reality, or AOA. AOA, aka Earth 295, was created as the result of Charles Xavier's death happening. This happening early also puts events in motion that basically allow Apocalypse to seize power, with him going on to rule the world, hence why we call it Age of Apocalypse. So if Charles is dead here, how does he become MODOK? Well, this specific version of Chuck is not actually the original version, but is instead a clone, or at least a clone of Xavier's brain, who apparently has no will of his own, and just, he's MODOK. It looks great. Looks like MODOK to me. This version of Professor X hails from the alternate reality of Earth 804, as glimpsed briefly in What If issue number 20 from the first What If comic series. Here we see the answer to the question, what if the Avengers had fought the Kree-Skrull War without Rick Jones? Unlike many other realities, Charles actually doesn't die here, but Rick Jones does. Charles also doesn't even become evil here, how cool. And the events here actually force Charles to take a more prominent role in this story, where he ends up as a leader for Earth and all of its heroes in their fight against the Kree, who are basically attempting to conquer the planet. This version of Charles Xavier hails from the Mutant X reality. Havoc gets transported to this reality after he seemingly dies in the comics. Instead though, his psyche was basically thrown through the multiverse and into the body of another Havoc in another reality. This Havoc had seemingly just died when the Earth 616 version of the character entered his mind and his body, allowing him to live on. Earth 616 Havoc would go on to live basically a whole life in the Mutant X reality, meeting tons of alternate versions of the 616 characters, including Madeline Pryor, who would become his wife, and whom he would also have a son with. What is it with Havoc and having children that exist solely in alternate realities? That is a weird thing that Havoc has. He gets to know them and then he's like, anyways, back to 616. Here, Havoc was the sole Summers brother who lived as well. Professor X was one of the characters from this reality, and obviously we're going to talk about him. Xavier becomes a villain in the Mutant X reality known as Earth 1298 after being corrupted by the Shadow King. Yeah, this version of Charles is one of the evil ones. He goes on to team up with Sinister at one point in a plot to take the power of all of Earth's telepaths for himself. Pretty evil. This plot ends up actually being so evil, so dastardly, so deadly, that Sinister even turns on Xavier, attempting to stop him. You know your plot is evil when Mr. Sinister's like, you know what, actually, I think I'm gonna stop you there. This is just a fun little goofy one, and I feel like a really fun way to end this video. In this universe, the X-Men are instead known as the Rex-Men. Here, they're all doggos. This appearance of Charles comes from one of the little short stories seen in Millennial Visions. Always a fun and bizarre, just comic collection of stories to revisit. This story was titled Universe Rex. Here, Professor Rex's Rex Dogs team includes dog versions of Colossus, Bishop, Storm, Gambit, Wolverine, and Banshee. Wild.
Sherlock Holmes better watch out because Detective Cyclops is coming for his gig. X-Men Ghost Boxes gave us the gift of Detective Cyclops in 2008. Hailing from Earth 889, this Cyclops is part of a pre-digital culture. He is still protecting the Earth from other dimension threats. This time, the threat is extra-dimensional mutants that have targeted Earth for annexation. Cyclops is part of the X Society, and they are basically the X-Men. They are the protectors of the Earth. Overall, the world looks super cool and vintage, and I absolutely would choose to live there. The art style is really cool, the story seems interesting, plus the characters are all detectives. Like, what more could you want? What the X Society is investigating here is the intentional passing of a mutant from possibly another universe. Scott is a pretty major player in the short series. At the start of the second comic, he goes on a big, introspective, slightly emotional, depressing, reflective monologue called The Last Testament of Scott Summers. Is Cyclops really still a Cyclops if you replace every piece of him? Remember that thought experiment they brought up in WandaVision, Theseus's paradox? Well, that was Cyclops the X-Sentinel. Earth 1011 exists in the X-Men Millennial Visions. What business do I have bringing up the Theseus thing though? In the comic, it's like a page-long explanation of what's happening and then a big picture of what they just explained. There is a photo of the main X-Men. The attached essay to that picture claims that as the X-Men got older, it was harder for them to heal from battle battle wounds, but they still wanted to fight and protect the Earth, so they started replacing the parts of themselves too hurt to carry on, like the blur breeds, a lower leg, or arm is too damaged, no big deal, we'll just replace it. They even downloaded their consciousness into these cybernetic bodies so they could fight forever. Their signature looks were kept so the public knew who was fighting for them, only of course it went wrong. The cybernetic sentinels started breaking down due to an overload of info in their brains and began focusing on their single goal, saving mutant kind. Any threat to mutant kind, even people, had to be eliminated. Is Cyclops still Cyclops if every piece of him is eventually replaced? I think not, but let me know what you think down below. There was once a Cyclops that worked under the Professor X that became Juggernaut. He existed on Earth 905 from Marvel's What If 13. This universe looked pretty bleak for humans. Professor X turning into the Juggernaut caused this whole chain of horrible reactions that led to the Professor crawling out of the rock, a supreme control peacemaker. Mutants ran everything, and humans spent their lives pretty much just living in fear. The Cyclops in this world is married to Jean with 3 kids, and he is still the kind of guy to stand up for all things right and good. So he realizes that humans shouldn't have to live like this, and leaves the Professor Juggernaut's X-Men. So the powers, morals, and love life are pretty much the same as the Scott we know, but this Scott has a different helmet. Instead of the sleek helmet we are used to, he has a bigger one with these like horn-looking things. The Cyclops and X-Men go up against the Professor Juggernaut X-Men and win. Juggernaut gets literally launched into space. There is a reality where everything is the same, but all mutants are of African American descent, including Cyclops. It's Earth 63 and it's super new. It was dreamed up in 2023's Bishop War College. Lucas Bishop accidentally ended up on Earth 63. He gets transported straight to the front gates of Earth 63's School for Gifted Youngsters and remarks that he had seen it all, but was even shocked by the sight in front of him. Scott Summers and Jean Grey are standing right in front of him, and their outfits are very similar to what they usually wear. They just have Wakandan design influences. As far as I can tell, the only difference between this Cyclops and our Cyclops is their history. Otherwise, it's the same powers and everything like that. Cyclops was once on a Deadpool-led team of X-Men. This version of Cyclops was glimpsed in Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe issue 4. When Deadpool is jumping around through the nexus of all realities, we see a bunch of different Deadpool variations. One of them is a Professor X pool. Professor X pool is flanked by Cyclops and Iceman. I don't really want to imagine the implications of combining Professor X and Deadpool, but Cyclops in this universe looks almost exactly the same. The one difference is his super costume is showing a bit more skin. He almost looks like he's wearing a tank top, and I wonder if Deadpool had anything to do with that. There is a Scott Summers out there known as Psych. He comes from the year 2000, originating in the Big Town comics. This world is known as Earth 110. In this universe, Summers presumably has all the same powers. He is still seen wearing his visor. His outfit looks a bit different. It has what looks like a V on the chest and some enormous shoulder pads. Psych was part of a gang of mutant thugs called the Mutts. They worked out of and controlled Newark, New Jersey. On Earth 616, Professor X and Cyclops are super close. The Professor is like a father to Cyclops. They are a super important relationship in the comics. However, in fact, on Earth 110, they are more likely to scrap with each other. The Mutts often fight with the X Squad. They did fight alongside them once out of necessity when Doctor Doom attacked. After the allyship was over and Doctor Doom was defeated, the Mutts were offered the opportunity to join the super team, the X Squad. However, they refused. There's a Cyclops out there with his eyes positioned vertically instead of horizontally. The first issue of Howard the Duck Volume 6 showed a brief appearance of Cyclops, but he looked a little different. His visor was vertical instead of horizontal. That implies that his eyes were vertical instead of horizontal. We don't know if this is just another mutation that Cyclops has and he's the only one, or if everyone in his world has it. We only see him. In the panel where we see him, this guy opens a wizard portal that shows a bunch of different universes. So we also see an evil Squirrel Girl, a Spider-Gwen Batman, scraggly Captain America, and Duck Iron Man. This Cyclops doesn't have a known universe designation because he's only been seen that one random time. Marvel gave us the gift of an Elizabethan Cyclops. His name is amazing. It is Scottius Summer Isle, and he is a witch breed. This takes place in 2003's Marvel 1602. The entire comic takes place in the last bit of the era, and literally everybody is there. I love it when Marvel writers have fun. The backstory for Scottius is that he worked on boats as a kid until his witch breed status was revealed. When that was found out, he wasn't treated very well, but before anything permanent happened, Scottius Scottius was found by Carlos Xavier to go to his school. Also, Professor Carlos calls the team his Mutantor. Iconic. He still met Jean Grey and fell in love with her, but she had to pretend to be a man. It was a whole thing, don't ask. On a mission, Scottius and Roberto, or Iceman, save Angel from the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. In this world, Scottius doesn't really have a visor, it's more just like a pair of cool sunglasses. Overall, I gave them a 10 out of 10, especially Scottius Summerisle. Cyclops looks like a prince already, and he actually was one once. In Uncanny X-Men 153, or Kitty's Fairy Tale, Cyclops plays the noble prince in the story Kitty Concocts. It's a fitting role for the X-Men. He rules over a faraway land and was set to marry none other than the enchanted princess Jean Grey. But then the kingdom was under attack, and Jean allied herself with the primal cosmic forces to save the city, but they made her turn evil, turn into the Dark Phoenix. It started slowly, but eventually the once gentle princess became evil and cursed her friend and fiance. In this world, Jean gave Scott his Eyes of Death, as they are called there. The prince and wizard, Xavier, fled the kingdom together, the wizard giving the prince his fancy blindfold. The pair continued to track the evil princess. Their mistake, she attacked them once they found her, or she found them. The other members of the X-Men get picked up along the way. There is a big final battle, like all the X-Men comics have, and then Jean Grey's pure soul takes over, returning the evil Dark Phoenix soul to the primal energies of the cosmos. When the Phoenix is gone, Cyclops' eyes return to normal, him and Jean get married finally, and they all lived happily ever after. The Monkeyverse is Earth 8101. It's apparently very similar to Earth 616, aside from all the monkeys. Monkey Cyclops is on the X-Simians. They fought the Beyonder to make this already wild world even wilder. There were vampire invaders at one point, and Monkey Cyclops had to help fight them off. He did so using all the same powers that 616 Cyclops has access to. The Monkeyverse has only shown up a handful of times, mainly in Marvel Apes volumes, which is unsurprising to say the least. I think Monkey Cyclops looks pretty interesting, and I would love to see more of him.
After multiple bodily injuries, Gambit and the X-Men belonging to the alternate reality of Earth 1011 began to replace their bodies with cybernetic parts. Eventually, this led to their entire bodies being replaced after their original bodies aged beyond use. Each X-Men downloaded their consciousness into cybernetic bodies designed after their original costumes. Turns out, that isn't really a terribly great idea. Their cybernetic brains began to become overcrowded with too much information, which led to their mental faculties basically breaking, leaving only the goal to save mutant kind as their primary directive. Because of this, they became the X-Sentinels, and in a twist of what we are used to with Sentinels, they started to hunt humans, leaving only mutants safe. The new Sun is an alternate Gambit that most Gambit fans do know about, and that's because he is Remy who reached his full potential. His parents were paid by the government project Alpha 1 to have a child based on their genetic potential. The child was raised by Alpha 1 and trained in the use of his powers before he even had them, so that by the time they manifested, he was able to escape the facility where he was being held. New Sun had control over kinetic energy at a molecular level. After being taken in by John Luke, Gambit learned that he was intended to become the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy to create heaven on Earth. Unfortunately, when he charged up his power in a special ritual, a chain reaction was started that caused everyone on Earth beside himself to completely burn up. The new Sun traveled to other universes hoping to prevent the same thing from happening there. Coming to the main Marvel universe, he first attempted to create a new world where everyone would eventually be transported to using the main reality's Gambit to help. But when he learned that his plan wasn't possible, he tried to take out Gambit, transporting both of them to his destroyed homeworld before he became a threat to the main universe's Earth world as well. One version of Gambit who comes pretty much entirely out of left field is the one from Earth 6706. This Gambit is Remy Mackenzie, and he is the firstborn son of an alternate Afro-Atlantean Prince Namor Mackenzie and his wife, Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman. So already this Remy is wildly different. Obviously, he has the Atlantean abilities passed down by his father, but from his mother, he has gained telekinesis strong enough to allow himself to fly and to lift heavy steel beams, while also gaining psionic force fields, which he has used to create hover discs and even a psionic sword. When the exiles visited this Earth, Gambit was excited about the chance for adventure with them, and he joined up. But after a few months with the team, he was called back home to take over his father's kingdom, as that version of Namor had been slain in battle. With the Exiles' help, Gambit was able to defeat the rebels and he united his Earth peacefully under his own rule. Experimenting with attempts to recreate the Captain Britain Corps, Jamie Braddock created a pocket reality in which England was at war with Krakoa. The Betsy Braddock of this pocket reality had teamed up with the mutant team Excalibur, made up of Richter, Rogue, Jubilee, and of course, Gambit. Now, after escaping London with the help of Cape Pride, the group were confronted by Jamie Braddock, who revealed that he intended to make Betsy the first of a new Captain Britain Corps. Turns out that she was not a fan, and so a fight ensued. Now, after Betsy was struck down, this pocket reality then fractured again, and all 4 of the mutants from Excalibur were all offered an Amulet of Right, and all became versions of Captain Britain, creating a new Captain Britain Corps. X-Men: The End takes place 10 to 15 years in the future on an Earth known as Earth 41001. As you might guess from the name, the X-Men faced their end when several of their deadliest foes coordinated their attacks on them. Gambit and Rogue in this world had been running the occasional mission for the X-Men, but were still apart from them, living as a married couple and raising their 2 children, Oliver and Rebecca. Now, one of the villains, Mr. Sinister, had also put a target on these 2 kids, and in order to protect both his children and those of Cyclops and Emma Frost, Gambit took them kids and brought them to Sinister himself. This is when Sinister dropped the bombshell that Gambit was actually the 3rd Summers brother, as Mr. Sinister had created him years ago by mixing some of Cyclops' DNA with his own to act as the ultimate weapon against the mutant Apocalypse. That's a lot to lay on a guy, and when Rogue lost her life against Sinister's forces, Gambit completely snapped, turned on Sinister together with Mystique, and once the villain was laid low, he actually took Sinister's place to try and undo some of the damage that he had done. Formerly an X-Men and good friend of their leader, Magneto, in the Age of Apocalypse reality, this Gambit left the team pretty heartbroken when Rogue fell for the wrinkly old Magneto. Gambit founded his own team, the X-Eternals, and found some comfort and romance with the mutant Lila Cheney. Eventually, Magneto called on Gambit's help specifically because of Remy's teleporting girlfriend, Lila. Using Lila's power, Gambit and his team travel across the galaxy to steal a piece of the Macron crystal. But in order to take from the crystal, Gambit apparently had to sacrifice the love that he felt for Rogue and was granted a shard of the crystal. Having succeeded in their mission, the Externals returned to Earth only to be betrayed by one of their own. Now, after Apocalypse's defeat, Remy joined the X-Men to help them rebuild again, and for about a decade, Earth prospered. Eventually though, a reborn Apocalypse re-established his world order, and Gambit passed away fighting his minions to buy his true love, Rogue, and her fellow X-Men enough time to escape. What a roller coaster of emotion. In the regular Earth 616 reality, after the X-Men learned of Gambit's involvement in the Mutant Massacre, they felt pretty betrayed, but still they eventually forgave their teammate. But what if they didn't? In the reality shown in What If Volume 1, number 106, the revelation of his involvement drove a huge wedge between the X-Men and Gambit, with the founding member Archangel, formerly Angel, especially having a whole lot of hatred for the Cajun. It's kind of understandable though, since the Mutant Massacre is what caused Warren to first ever lose his wings. Eventually, Archangel hunted Gambit down and challenged him to a duel to the death, except during the fight, Remy stopped fighting back, correctly guessing that Archangel would realize that taking Remy's life wouldn't really solve anything. But no one thought about the mutant Marrow. She very much felt otherwise and took Gambit down, ramming one of her bone daggers into his chest. With his dying breath, Remy basically asked the X-Men to forgive her and end the cycle of violence. In the world of Marvel Noir, superheroes don't really exist in the same way they do on Earth 616. There are very few who have legit superpowers, and the mutants who normally make up the X-Men are actually a group of sociopathic teenagers recruited by discredited psychiatrist Charles Xavier, who ran the Xavier School for Exceptionally Wayward Youth in Westchester, New York in 1937. In this world, Gambit is just Remy LeBeau, an ally of Thomas Holloway, the vigilante known as Angel, and he is also the owner of the Creole Club, a casino and a nightclub. He was also a pretty bad dude and was not above resorting to physical altercations in order to retrieve his debts, which was actually his downfall. Remy had been harassing Wanda Magnus over unpaid debts, and that got him sent to the pearly gates by a vengeful Peter Magnus in retaliation. And in case you didn't pick up on it, that is Wanda and Pietro Maximoff of the Noir reality. In another alternate reality though, coming to us in the X-Men Forever world of Earth 161, the X-Men found their world forever change, with members dropping in and out and some even swapping their powers. One constant in all of that was Gambit, who turned into one of the group's most reliable mainstays. This version of the Cajun sensation was actually named Remy Picard instead of LeBeau. This version of Gambit replaced his flashy costume with dark shades, a black suit, a red shirt, and a tie. Also, in this world, instead of starting a relationship with Rogue, Jean-Luc Picard Jr. had a relationship with Kitty Pryde. And last up today, we end with a mystery. In the alternate future known as the XSE future, which is the timeline that the mutant Bishop comes from, there was an elderly man named LeBeau, who was also known as the Witness. The Witness was called that because he was said to have been the last person to have ever seen the X-Men before they were wiped out. Shortly after Bishop came to the present time, back in the day, he recognized Earth 616 Gambit as the same man, only around 60 to 80 years younger. That on its own is pretty interesting, but later on, the Witness also made an appearance in the present day, and he also revealed that he existed simultaneously in all timelines at once. But this leaves the mystery of who the Witness, aka LeBeau, really is. It could be that at some point Gambit's powers evolve into him becoming the Witness, or maybe the Witness is Gambit's future offspring. What do you guys think? Rogue in this universe still had her absorption abilities, and when the X-Men were split into two factions thanks to the betrayal of Storm in this story, Rogue was teamed up with Gambit and Nightcrawler. Now Nightcrawler got a call from an old friend who needed help in Jackson, Mississippi, and Rogue offered to go along since she was from that area. Now when they got to the address, they found Mystique, who had actually faked the call, and in anger, Rogue attacked her for always interfering with her life, and she fell unconscious after hitting into a gas tank, which caused an explosion. Now, when Nightcrawler got to her, she was not breathing, and so he gave her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She lived, but something had happened. Instead of just getting Kurt's powers, Rogue and Nightcrawler had actually both completely switched powers and appearances. While she initially hated her new blue appearance and tail, not to mention only having teleportation powers, she did eventually get to hang out with Spider-Man and get more accustomed to her new qualities, but then the whole thing got cancelled and we will never know more. Now Rogue is ordinarily one of the most powerful mutants in the 616 world. Her ability to absorb other people's powers makes her almost unbeatable in battle. However, in 1602, witch hunter Angela, a 17th century version of Rogue named Anna Maria, discovers that her absorption abilities are useless against the Enchantress, who uses magic to possess witch breeds, aka mutants. Without a teacher, Rogue's powers are pretty much completely untamed, and due to how deadly her absorption powers are, she was kept locked away in a tower. Well, that, and she was being used as a pawn in a twisted game between the Enchantress and a warrior called Angela. Now whilst Angela had made it her mission to eradicate any witch breed she met, she took pity on Anna Maria as she saw her as a sympathetic and tragic character. The Enchantress though eventually possessed Anna, and Angela had to bring her down, only for Anna Maria to be eventually resurrected later on. On Earth 616, Rogue can absorb others' powers, which gives her near limitless potential. However, her powers are dampened by control. Even though she trained under Charles Xavier for years, Rogue's control of her absorption abilities has never been that strong. But in Exiles number 99, writer Chris Claremont imagines a version of Rogue where control was never a problem. The reality hopping team known as the Exiles come across a young mutant named Anna Raven, who, like her Earth 616 twin, has absorption powers. However, this version of Rogue only absorbs through her hands as opposed to her entire body. This version can also recall the powers of every person she's ever touched, making her pretty darn capable. She also came from a rich family but rebelled, choosing to become an outlaw and master thief. Now whilst breaking into a vault one day, she was found by her world's Iron Man, but was saved by Morph of the Exiles. Joining the team, she dove straight into their mission of fixing broken realities. X-Men: The End takes place place 10 to 15 years in the future of an Earth known as Earth 41001. As you might guess from the name, the X-Men faced their end when several of their deadliest foes coordinated their attacks on them. Gambit and Rogue in this world had been running the occasional mission for the X-Men, but were still apart from them, living as a married couple and raising their 2 children, Olivier and Rebecca. Now, Mr. Sinister manipulated Gambit into handing over the children to him, so in response, Rogue went to the Neverland camps and freed her children, but she was unfortunately wiped out by Mr. Sinister, who stabbed her in the back while he posed as Gambit, which is quite surprising given the fact that this Rogue still had the abilities of Carol Danvers. But moving over to the House of M reality, created by the Scarlet Witch that saw mutants becoming the dominant species of the Earth, Rogue's parents lost their lives when she was very young. Because of that, she spent some time in an orphanage, but when her mutant powers inevitably manifested, she earned the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., which in this reality was run by Sebastian Shaw and allied tightly with Magneto, who ruled the Earth. Mystique was sent to recruit Rogue, and as usual, the two formed a bond. So much so that Mystique also adopted Rogue here as well. Rogue was trained well in the use of her powers until she was able to join the elite squad of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents known as the Red Guard, alongside Wolverine and her adoptive brother, Nightcrawler. In the Ultimate Universe, Rogue, who in this universe is named Marion Carlisle, was found and experimented on by Weapon X when she was still a young child. She was subsequently sent on many dangerous operations and missions. When the X-Men made a public appearance on a television show, Rogue was used by Weapon X to absorb some of Colossus's knowledge about their mansion's secrets. She reported said secrets to Weapon X, who subsequently captured the team. Now, the Brotherhood of Mutants would later rescue all the captured mutants, including Rogue, and after Weapon X was defeated, Rogue stayed with the Brotherhood, and when the President of the United States ordered the Ultimates to capture all Brotherhood-affiliated mutants, including Rogue, she surrendered peacefully and was offered amnesty in exchange for her joining the X-Men, where she had a brief relationship with Iceman. Now, later on, she was kidnapped by Gambit, whose employers gave Rogue a special suit that they developed with which she could control her powers. However, when Fenris, that organization, decided that Gambit was now useless and wanted him wiped out, he and Rogue fought them off together. Rogue then quit the X-Men, rejoining the team after Gambit was taken out and she had gained his powers. During Magneto's attack on New York, Rogue permanently absorbed the powers of Juggernaut, gaining his super strength, and she would eventually find herself living on the island of Utopia. In Infinity Countdown, Captain Marvel #1, the Prime Marvel Universe Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, went to visit alternate reality Earth 9289 using the power of the Reality Stone, since the gem linked her to the wielders of the gem in other realities. Now, funnily enough, the wielder of the gem in this reality was Anna Marie. In this reality, when Rogue infamously touched Miss Marvel to absorb her powers, Carol grabbed onto her arm and didn't let go. In addition to Carol's Kree DNA glitching out Rogue's powers, the prolonged contact caused each of these two to end up absorbing the powers, memories, and personality of the other completely. Now, Rogue sought out Professor X's help, but instead of her normal story, afterwards she went to space and as a consequence of an encounter with the Brood, gained the power boost to become binary. She looks awesome as binary, even if she doesn't look very different compared to Carol Danvers as the character. When Earth's heroes were taken to a distant planet by the Beyonder to perform in the Secret Wars, it was only because of the scientific mind of Reed Richards that they could return home. However, in the reality shown in What If number 114, Reed actually passed away, leaving both heroes and villains stuck there. Now, over time, both parties decided to put their differences aside and just settle down. Rogue became romantically involved with Captain America of all people, only it's important to note that it wasn't really Rogue anymore who was in charge of her body, but again, the Carol Danvers personality took over. Carol, or Rogue, being able to control Rogue's absorption powers, had a kid with Captain America who they named Sarah. Their daughter had taken on Carol's powers, but she also could pick up Thor's hammer and often donned her father's shield as well, taking the codename Crusader. As is often the case with big names in Marvel and DC Comics, some of the coolest alternate versions of characters came from the big Amalgam event, where characters from Marvel and characters from DC were merged together to create entirely new characters with aspects of both. For the character of Rogue, she was amalgamated with the largely unknown DC character Gypsy, and went by the name Anna Marie Reynolds, aka Runaway. Despite being a fusion of the two, Runaway only really showed off her rogue powers, abilities, and memory absorption powers in tandem with her flight and super strength, meaning she basically just had the same powers as Rogue, who had absorbed Carol Danvers' powers. Now, Runaway was a former member of the Judgment League Avengers of Romani descent, who also curiously spoke with a strong Texan accent. And lastly, in 1994's What If second series number 66, while she and Mystique are on their way to Riker's Island to bust out the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the pair run into the Avengers, and having already absorbed both Captain Marvel and Captain America's abilities, Rogue drains the mighty Thor to the point of his demise, and she proceeds to wreak havoc. She takes out the Vision and frees her comrades in arms, only to accidentally take them out too. After the Blob makes an ill-advised pass at her, she accidentally knocks him clean out of the plane they're in before exploding it and wiping out everyone on board, including Mystique. In her emotionally distraught state, she is approached by Loki, who convinces her that they need to attack Asgard. She agrees. When the time comes for her to lay the final blow on Odin, the sight of Odin's genuine grief at Thor's passing helps Rogue to access the residual memories of Thor in her psyche. With Thor explaining that he was an ideal as well as a person, Rogue was able to access the full powers of Thor. She then turns on the trickster god and defeats him before taking up the mantle of the new God of Thunder.
Number 10. Symbiote Beast. In the world of the evil Codex's home reality, Earth 1051, Beast himself seems to become one with a symbiote. If you aren't familiar with Codex of Earth 1051, let me update you on that. He's basically the evil version of Dylan Brock, who, in that reality, grew up with his mother alive as opposed to his father. He ends up ruling the world as the villain Codex after falling prey to Null's dark whisperings, becoming manipulated by him until his 616 counterpart and the 616 Eddie Brock are able to set him free. Beast, as a member of the X-Men, seems to have acquired his own symbiote and was one of the few heroes who was apparently left to stand up against Codex, but ultimately he and of course the mutant team, the X-Men, failed. We only see this version of Beast in one issue, or at least that's all we've seen of him so far, but I really love this symbiote design for him. I think it looks super cool, hence why I wanted to start off this list with Symbiote Beast. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that thumbs up? It really does help us out, and it feeds the algorithm. Feed the algorithm! Sometimes we must. Number 9. Earth A. Everyone gets sued, left, right, and center when it comes to Earth A. Oh boy. For those who are not familiar with this reality and its inhabitants, it was a world where most people did not actually have superpowers. It is also known by its designated number of Earth 721. Here, a scientist created a device that would allow the people of the Earth A reality to travel to Earth 616, so they might go on vacation living the life of their superhero counterparts on this Earth. If you've heard about Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, getting romantic with Juggernaut, aka Kane Marco, this was actually later revealed to have not actually been Jen, but instead her impersonator from Earth A. That's how we made sense of that weird thing that happened, because it was a weird thing. As a result of many heroes being impersonated by their Earth A counterparts, there were a lot of lawsuits as a result of that revelation. Beast of Earth 616 was one of the many who attempted to sue his Earth A counterpart, who did in fact, of course, impersonate him. Beast was hoping to sue the Henry McCoy of Earth 712 for any and all scientific discoveries he'd made while disguised as his 616 counterpart. Number 8. Sinister vs. Xavier. In this reality, Mr. Sinister also formed his own team of X-Men. However, Beast, being Beast, even in this reality, he remained a member of Charles Xavier's, aka Professor X's, team. When X's team came head-to-head with Sinister's X-Men team over the fate of Young Mutant Storm, Xavier's X-Men seemingly won this fight. As a result, they would recruit Cyclops and Havoc from Sinister's team, who they truly believed wanted to join them. However, it turns out that Cyclops and Havoc actually have their own reasons for joining up with Xavier's team, and they perhaps are maybe not done serving Sinister just quite yet. Number 7. Creature. In Morgan Le Fay's warped reality, Hank McCoy ended up being transformed into a medieval hero known as creature. In this world, all of the Avengers were basically imprisoned, having been warped to believe they were meant to be alive in this medieval time, despite the year also still being 1998 here. They didn't think that was weird at all. And they believed they were all members of Queen Morgan's elite group of protectors known as the Queen's Vengeance. Although I gotta be real, Creature looks like less of a hero here and more of a court jester to me. That hat. Fortunately, Scarlet Witch was able to use her power to see things more clearly and realize that the world had been altered, which is why Morgan initially tries to keep her in prison, but hey, that doesn't work. Scarlet Witch was able to use her power combined with her friend's power to return the world to normal. Also, big thanks to Wonder Man there, who Wanda basically gives power to and then everything gets set back. Number 6. Earth 12. Have you ever wondered what Beast would be like if he were a celebrity? Well, wonder no more, because this is exactly what we get to see when we venture into a version of Mimic's home reality, Earth 12. This version of Mimic, aka Calvin Rankin, hails from a world where mutants are not feared by humans, but instead are more well regarded, being treated more like famous celebrities, who humans actively want to be like. All of the heroes of that world are more celebrated than like, you know, regular people being like, you guys, you're sometimes good but sometimes bad. Having their own fans and various brands who actively want to represent them. This version of Mimic would go on to be selected as the leader of the Exiles team in issue number 1, but we'd also see a glimpse into his home reality, and among those other mutants present, would get to see Hank McCoy's Beast thriving here as well. We don't really know how it happened, but we do know that even in this reality, Hank goes from being a humanoid-looking beast with oversized feet and hands to the bouncing blue beast from modern comics we've come to know and love. We can assume probably that it happened in a similar way. We also don't know like really what Beast's life is like here, but I know that Calvin and Angel in this reality like both co-founded a charity, so I'm assuming Calvin did something cool with Beast too. I don't know, maybe Beast was the one that helped him write a book. Number 5. MC2. I love the MC2 reality of Earth 982. This is the home reality for Spider-Girl, aka Mayday Parker, the daughter of Peter Parker's Spider-Man and Mary Jane Watson. You see, in this reality, heroes were actually allowed to settle down, start families, and even, get this, retire. Alas, Beast was not quite as lucky as some others from this reality though. He ends up in a fight against Juggernaut and is really only seen in a few issues from this line of comics. I would have to assume that at some point he does retire, since many younger heroes take over for those who have come before here, but we really don't see him that much, so I cannot confirm or deny this theory based on anything from the comics that I've seen. Sad, because I would actually be interested in seeing what Beast would get up to if he were allowed to settle down, have kids of his own, or you know, retire and maybe focus on more purely scientific pursuits. I could see that too. Professor Beast, let's go. Number 4. Beast. Now with more Beast. This version of Beast hails from Earth 763. Here, Beast ended up becoming even more Beast-like than his Earth 616 version when his mutation was amplified and then unable to be reversed. Here, while Henry appeared even more Beast-like physically, he also became mentally more like a Beast himself, losing much of his smarts, with the mutation also manifesting in his mind. With these changes to his life, he ended up with Wonder Man in this reality. When Wonder Man was killed in a fight against MODOK, Beast enters a rage, going completely berserk and decimating MODOK in response. MODOK would explode, seemingly killing Beast as well. However, it only seemed like Beast was killed in this reality because instead it was right before the instant of that fatal explosion that he was drafted to join the Exiles, as so happens with some Exiles members. Number 3. Dr. Henry McCoy. Honestly, I'm mainly picking this alternate version of Beast because I love his design and how he's drawn here. He makes his first and only appearance in Astonishing X-Men Ghost Boxes issue number 1. Here, the Doctor is a member of Emma Frost's X Society. This reality seems to take place in more of a turn-of-the-century style period, with calls even showing up on old-timey looking monitors that to me kind of resemble more of like a classic old-school radio. You know, the one with all the buttons and all the dials and stuff. They're also referred to as audio-visual calls as opposed to just a FaceTime or a video call. So it's kind of like turn of the century, but we got some modern technology, but it's still old, you know what I mean? Very interesting stuff. The Doctor is just as much of a genius as we're used to him being, and seems to mainly be on Emma's team because of his brilliant intellect, which honestly, fair enough. Number 2, Elderly Beast. This version of Beast comes to us from the collection of short stories and alternate worlds that are showcased in X-Men Millennial Visions from the year 2000. Here we get a glimpse into a future reality of Earth 1012. As the mutant population continues to boom, the X-Men are forced to take on new students. As they continue to get older, they do their best to keep up with the new generation of young mutants, but instead struggle to maintain a sense of authority over their rambunctious students. In Beast's case, he ends up having his denture stolen as part of a prank that's played on him by the younger students. Poor Beast, his dentures. Number 1, Dark Beast. Probably one of the most iconic alternates that Beast has ever had. At one point, I thought the Beast we currently had in modern day comics might actually be this version of Beast based off of his cruel and often unforgiving behavior as of late, but nah, I'm pretty sure the modern day Beast just, I guess, became a paranoid, power-hungry dude all on his own. Dark Beast was confirmed to be his own separate thing, and as far as I know, is still decapitated, though no longer dead. He was decapitated and dead, and now he's just capitated. He's just a floating head. His head was preserved instead by Mr. Sinister and apparently kept alive. So, he's alive, but you know, he's just a head now. This version of Beast hails from the Age of Apocalypse reality of Earth 295, where he was once one of Apocalypse's geneticists, and in this world, Apocalypse ends up taking over the world. Ooh. Without Xavier's guidance, Beast became a mad scientist who was willing to follow through with even the most immoral and dangerous experiments, with many mutants becoming his test subjects against their will. Pretty scary stuff.
Kicking off the list at number 10 is the Legion of Night. The Legion of Night comes from a world where Mr. Sinister corrupted the genomes of those who underwent the mutant resurrection protocols on Krakoa. Because of this, Sinister's control over humanity and mutantdom became supreme. One of his experiments was combining the genetics of different mutants to create powerful chimeras to serve him, and it made for some crazy awesome comic book moments. A particularly special project was turning the genes of Nightcrawler into a band of teleporting assassins. However, due to a spell cast by Margali Zardos, Nightcrawler's genome was actually unstable, ruining any attempts of cloning him. Years later though, after Mother Righteous took out Zardos to break the spell, Mr. Sinister could finally work with Nightcrawler's genome and formed the Legion of Night. This group was comprised of beings that were spliced together versions of Nightcrawler and many other different heroes, including Colossus, Pixie, Emplate, Pyro, Sabretooth, Cyclops, and even Spider-Man. This group were incredibly capable, being able to collect magical artifacts from across the Marvel Universe, even being able to defeat All-Father Thor and take his hammer. Number 9, Wagnarine. But the Legion of Night, while having leadership in Mother Righteous, also had field leaders. One of which was the mutant Banshee possessed by the spirit of variance called Vox Ignis, and the other was Mr. Sinister's favorite Nightcrawler chimera, Wagnarine. Mixing the DNA of both Nightcrawler and Wolverine, Wagnarine, funnily enough, was more of a mix of Laura Kinney, X-23, and Nightcrawler, and she made for an excellent assassin and leader for Mother Righteous once she had been freed from the control of Mr. Sinister. Wagnarine ended up beating the odds and procreated with the Cyclops Nightcrawler, aka Summer Night, to create a golden mutant teleporter who seemingly teleported to a random location immediately after her birth, causing Summer Night to go a little crazy and lose control of himself, falling victim to the influence of Sinister once again. Eventually, it was revealed that Mother Righteous had actually taken the child, and when that was revealed to Wagnarine, she defected. Now 900 years later, she was finally able to bring down Mother Righteous and go on to try and live a happy life with her baby. Number 8, Nocturne. Nocturne isn't really an alternate version of Nightcrawler. She's actually the daughter of an alternate reality version of Nightcrawler, but honestly, she outshines her daddy, so we're talking about her instead. Nocturne, who eventually ended up in Earth 616, came from the alternate reality of Earth 2182, and is the daughter of both Nightcrawler and, surprisingly enough, the Scarlet Witch. She was raised under the watchful eye of her father, who she lived with at Charles Xavier's school. Her mother stayed as an Avenger but remained romantically involved with Nightcrawler, but Nocturne quickly moved up the ranks to become an X-Man when she was old enough, and eventually was able to fight at the side of her father on a team of X-Men led by Wolverine, which included Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Kitty Pryde, Phoenix Force, and Armageddon. Armageddon. After moving to Earth 616, she sees the main Nightcrawler as a father figure, and they have become pretty close friends. Now just like him, Nocturne has blue fur, 3 fingers on each hand, 2 toes per foot, and a prehensile tail, although her tail is retractable, which is kinda weird. Like her father, she's extremely athletic and is a skilled fighter. She's able to cling to any surface by her hands and feet, but she can't teleport like her Poppy. Instead, Nocturne has the ability to possess someone for up to 12 hours, and then gain access to that person's abilities and memories. She also has superhuman agility, low-level telepathy, and can release concussive bolts of energy called Hex Bolts, kinda like her mom. Number 7. Citizen V. In the Darkhold Blade story, a dark magic wave called the V-Wave was unleashed by Deacon Frost when he offered himself as host to the ancient blood demon La Magra. The V-Wave turned billions of humans into vampires, but it also affected superhumans, randomly converting them into either humans or vampires. On Krakoa, almost every mutant that was turned into a human was completely decimated by the ones that were turned into vampires, with the exception of just Nightcrawler, who managed to teleport away before he was turned into a human. Kurt eventually made his way back to the United States of America and formed the last Avengers with the Prowler and Silver Sable, taking up the mantle of Citizen V. In a world dominated by vampires, Citizen V and his Avengers tried to locate a cure for vampirism, which unfortunately for Citizen V led to his untimely demise at the hands of the Daywalker Blade. But up until then, he was really freaking cool. Number 6. X2. If you ever watched the second ever live action X-Men movie, fittingly titled X2, then you probably remember the absolutely awesome opening scene, which was basically just a showcase of Nightcrawler and his powers. Played magnificently by Alan Cumming, this Nightcrawler is brainwashed into attempting an attack on the President of the United States, and the scene basically sees him take on the entire Secret Service, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, I actually got some right here. Outside of that scene though, Nightcrawler shares much of the same history with the comic book counterpart. One major difference between the comic book Nightcrawler and his film counterpart is that he wears ordinary civilian clothing as opposed to an X-Men uniform, because he's not actually a member of the X-Men in the film, just an ally of the team. Some other differences would be that he has blue flesh instead of blue fur, his skin is also decorated by angelic symbols to reflect his religious nature, and I guess his puff of smoke is more blue than purple, but who cares? That opening scene sold me immediately on the character of Nightcrawler, and for that, I thank it. Number 5. Age of Apocalypse. In the Age of Apocalypse, Nightcrawler is very similar to his Earth 616 counterpart, except he's an incredibly capable warrior brandishing dual blades at all times, and he isn't really as lovable as he would be normally. This Nightcrawler hates the church, having had a traumatic experience when he was much younger, which is a far cry from the original. Nightcrawler in this universe is also close to his mother, Mystique, which is why he gladly takes on the Darkhold last name. This Nightcrawler believes his biological father is actually Sabretooth, since Mystique stated that she had gone to the trouble of finding a father with fur when Nightcrawler complains that he was cold. What's really interesting though is that this version of Nightcrawler actually chooses to remain in the 616 reality and joins up with X-Force. But being on Earth 616, he does get mistaken for the original Nightcrawler, which he does not appreciate. Like, at one point he pushed Kitty Pryde for mistaking him for a resurrected Nightcrawler. While working with X-Force, he has successfully took out his reality's Blob by teleporting a shark into his stomach, which devoured Blob from the inside out, and he also took out Iceman from the Age of Apocalypse reality, where the weakened Iceman begged for forgiveness before being thrown into an incinerator, which is a pretty fast way to go, I guess. He has also made several unsuccessful attempts on Dark Beast's life, but that never really went anywhere. In March 2013's Extermination crossover, this focused on Nightcrawler's attempt to get back to his home universe, but unfortunately, during the event, the Age of Apocalypse reality was destroyed alongside this version of Nightcrawler. Number 4. Earth X. Okay, so this one to me is really strange. In the Earth X reality, where the entire population was given superpowers thanks to the release of Terrigen Mists, Nightcrawler was a part of Excalibur like he is in the normal universe. During a fight with Grey Gargoyle, he was forced to teleport away to a random village, but strangely found himself turned back into just a regular old dude. with no powers, and for that, he was attacked by the villagers who are now mutated. Eventually, he was visited by the demon Mephisto in disguise. Mephisto convinced Kurt that everyone hated him for being a freak and convinced Nightcrawler to want revenge. Under that direction, Mephisto brought Nightcrawler to Limbo, transformed him to appear as Belasco, and clouded his memory to lead him to believe that he really was the Belasco in Dante's Inferno. He was then put in suspended animation and frozen in ice. Later on, in a fight with Captain America and Captain Marvel, Mephisto ended up causing Captain America to accidentally send the frozen Belasco Nightcrawler into the past, where he essentially did the same things that Belasco is known for in the regular continuity. Earth X is amazing, but I'd be kinda lying if I said it wasn't incredibly confusing at times and deep, and does a lot of weird things just like this. Belasco Nightcrawler eventually became a good guy and one of the key figures in deciding life or death on Earth 9997. Number 3. Thor Corps. Okay, so this version of a Nightcrawler isn't really around for any significant amount of time, but the idea of him is just so cool to me, and I kinda want more of it. During 2015 Secret War event, when Dr. Doom created Battleworld, he pulled together an entire army of alternate reality versions of Thor to act as his own personal police force. This Thor Corps was incredibly powerful and had some of the coolest spliced together versions of Thor out there, and one of them just happened to be Nightcrawler, wielding the ancient Asgardian Mjolnir. Kurt Wagner was one of the Thor Corps members dispatched to Arcadia after Baroness She-Hulk resisted arrest and fled in A-Force number 3 in 2015, and that's all the information I really have about him. Number 2. Ultimate. In the Ultimate universe of Earth 1610, Nightcrawler was rescued by the X-Men from the Weapon X program. While accepted as a member of the X-Men for a time, he's kind of insane, and he has a fixation on Dazzler. Like, I'm talking this guy stole Dazzler and kept her in a cave where the other members of the team could not find her while she was being healed. Nightcrawler eventually left the X-Mansion looking for a place where he could fit in, and thinking he may have found it with the Morlocks. Now, funnily enough though, Kurt and the mutant Toad were captured by the Morlocks and the X-Men came to rescue them, but Nightcrawler refused to leave and became the leader of the Morlocks instead. But that didn't even last, as Nightcrawler eventually rejoined the X-Men. After taking the power-enhancing Banshee substance, Kurt got some upgrades. Now, wielding energy javelins, his appearance also drastically changed, with his hands becoming almost clawed and his tail being pointed at the end. He also makes gold yellow smoke instead of the classic purple smoke when he's teleporting. I don't know why, that's just what they did. Unfortunately, Kurt Wagner and Dazzler, who for some reason became his girlfriend, both passed away during Magneto's ultimatum wave. Ah, sad. Number 1. Days of Future Past. With the power of teleportation, Nightcrawler is one slippery guy. Very hard to bring down, let's say. In the Days of Future Past, it's no different. At first, Nightcrawler was seemingly taken out at the Westchester Mansion by the US Army, along with his wife Amanda Sefton, while accompanying Ilyana Rasputina to a bus stop. Turns out, nope, he somehow survived the Mansion Massacre. Now, fleeing to Europe and establishing himself in United Germany, Kurt was both part of the priesthood and the European Mutant Collective, and he now went by the name Father Wagner. In this position, he was a constant irritation to the hierarchy, and for that was tracked and attacked by the Hound, Rachel Summers. Nightcrawler, or Father Wagner I should say, managed to buy Pietro enough time to get the orphan mutants he was protecting to safety before being apparently taken out by Ahab. But, what do you know, Kurt survived one more time and made his way back to the X-Men, where he became romantically involved with Bess. Together they were part of the mission that retrieved Rachel Summers and freed her from Ahab's control. So, not bad. Not bad at all.